A special stakes preview for the Saturday races at OAKLAWN, including the Southwest Stakes on the road to the Kentucky Derby. Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host for this special episode of Trust the Profits. My name is Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. And welcome to a special stakes preview of 3 really exciting stakes races taking place this Saturday at OAKLAWN Park, which features, of course, the Grade 3 Southwest Stakes, which is a pivotal race, I think, in the early stages of this run to the Kentucky Derby. Winner getting Kentucky Derby points. And it's a fascinating field with some big names, big trainers, and some exciting pedigree. And I actually think it came up maybe a little stronger than the field we saw last week at the Lecomte. So here to join me, because I can't just do this myself. We got all the Pegasus stuff going on and all the other good stuff that you're, of course, should subscribe to Trust the Profits to watch. But to help me out here is my good friend, Jeff Besa from Charting Horse Value. And Jeff, I'm glad to see that my fashion trends are sweeping the nation. I appreciate you coming on and being a fellow Cap brother with me today.
Yes.
While we go through this card.
Well, I wore the hat in honor of you. But I've been wearing these kind of hats for a while. Okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't invent it, but
no, hardly not.
So it's a great racing hat. Maybe I'll have it up. Maybe I'll be wearing it this weekend up at Hot Springs, Arkansas. I'll be there.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you see a guy wearing the hat, go up, say hi to Jeff, introduce yourself. And Jeff, thank you so much for being on here. And I'm sure a lot of people know who you are, but you have a great product in terms of Charting Horse Value. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. And so just wanted to give you maybe a couple of seconds here before we kind of dive into some of the races to talk a little bit about, you and I have very similar approaches. You were an engineer in a previous life. I focus on data analytics for my full-time job. So we both are very data-driven people, and you kind of took that and put that to work in a horse racing capacity. And so your charts have been really helpful, and let people know a little bit about them, where they can find them, stuff like that.
Yeah, my website's chartinghorsevalue.com. You can also subscribe and be a customer on Horse Racing Nation. They've got a link for expert picks, and you can subscribe. You can buy a daily product for $10, or you can subscribe for the monthly product, and you get every thoroughbred race in America, okay, for that price. Now, my product, I wrote the first program back in, I think, 1994, and I did it on a laptop. These are very rare back then, and
Yeah.
to get on the internet, you had to use a dial-up modem.
I'm old enough to remember that.
So now, when I first created it, I put all the data in manually. I was just doing it for the one card, and I couldn't put that many fields in manually, but I did. But then I figured out some sources for data, and now I'm getting that data from Bristnet. But it's primarily, the whole idea of it. I read a few books, but the idea of it is that, the market is very efficient. In fact, if you track favorites or you track performance of the odds, it's very predictable. Okay. But so we should be able to look at past performances and come up with a model for how likely the horse is to win. And that's what I've done. Okay. So I have 2 important columns on my chart. One, which we'll go into as we're going through the races.
Yeah.
But one, they're basically fair value odds lines. I compare that to the morning line to give you an idea of where I think there may be some value, and value, profit. Okay. Profitable horses. But we'll talk about that more in detail as we go through the races. But that's what it's there for. When I first created this program, I had only one column of data. One column of outcome, and that was a fair odds line. That's the only thing I had. Now I provide all sorts of other things, which like pace analysis and jockey trainer scores, all sorts of stuff to give you a more complete picture handicapping that race. But fundamentally, it comes down to what's the chance that this horse wins, and is it a good bet?
Yep. No, I think it's a great product. I know it's a product that a lot of people love using. I know a lot of stable dual players swear by your product and have had a lot of success with it too. And so just, if you're not familiar with it, go check it out. Chartinghorsevalue.com. And so it's and as well as the HRN, we're gonna have a link in the video that you can check it out too as well. So let's dive into the races. And there's 3 stakes races. We'll kick things off here with the Martha Washington Stakes, which is the 5th race on the card at OAKLAWN Park on Saturday. This is for 3-year-old fillies going a mile and a 16th on the dirt. The favorite is Defining Purpose, a Ken McPeak horse, going off at 6-5. But you can see really the top 4 horses are pretty close to each other in the grand scheme of things. Olivia Twist, the Todd Fincher horse at 2-1. Brad Cox, of course, having an entry on this big day at OAKLAWN in Wet Paint at 9-2. And then finally, Dwayne Lucas with Take Charge Brianna at 6-1. You have a couple of long shots then in Taxton, Key to Success. But Jeff, I want to pull up the chart that you have for this race, and I'll let you kind of kick things off here with the Martha Washington. Talk to me about kind of what your chart says for this race and where you think there's the best value to go for in this one.
Okay. One opening comment, and this is particularly true on the 2-turn routes at OAKLAWN, and that is speed on the rail. Speed is definitely good at OAKLAWN, sprinting or routing, but especially good routing and on the rail, or certainly on the inside. That's just something to keep in mind. And there's been a lot of horses coming home at OAKLAWN at big odds, maybe not in this race, but at big odds on that rail. So, the chart is going to communicate a story, okay? And, it may not be the story we want, but it's going to tell a story like, how good is the favorite? Right. Who could beat this favorite? Where is their value? Okay. So the first thing let's look at is in the DS column, which is an abbreviation for distance and surface. You see it's an 8.5 furlong race on the dirt. And you see this asterisk, 1 asterisk. That's a score I give from 0 to 5, 5 being the best. And a 1 is, quite poor. Okay. And a race might get a poor score like that for a couple reasons. But in this particular race, it's getting it because there's really no horse with significant value. Over there on the right is this value column. And that's comparing the lowest of my 2 fair odds lines, PFDS odds and best odds, which we'll talk about. But it's comparing that to the morning line. And there's 3 horses that get some value, and none of them are over 10. And 10 is like this thumb rule I have for a significant amount of value. And the other thing you notice is that the horses are sorted, and the top 2 horses on the chart are the 2 short prices.
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is not a great betting race. That's the bottom line there. Now, you'll see the Olivia Twist and Defining Purpose. One of those 2 horses is probably going to win.
Yes.
And now I think the draw that Defining Purpose gets is much better. Okay. That 3-hole. And I have tremendous respect for Fincher, though. And this horse is 3 for 3 undefeated, definitely taking a step up in class. But the horse has a legitimate shot. I wouldn't talk anybody off of Olivia Twist, but I think Defining Purpose has got a better shot. Now you see this letter grade. All right. So the horses are sorted from top to bottom based on PFDS odds. Okay. That's my proprietary algorithm for what I think is a fair odds line. But that's just one factor. Okay. Yeah. Then I got this energy column, which is kind of like a speed figure. I got trainer and jockey. I got the fitness column, the form cycle, nothing particularly interesting happening there. You got 2 horses, C2s, 2 horses second off a claim. Anyway, all those factors get rolled into that letter grade. And so Defining Purpose gets the highest score I give a horse. It's a K for key. And is the plus. It's the only horse, if you told me based purely off the chart, who would I bet on? It would be Defining Purpose.
Yeah.
So Kind of boring pick, obviously 6-5. So that's where I start with. What's your take? And I'll give you a few other comments.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always enjoy having you on because we approach, you have your algorithms and your numbers and I kind of do things maybe an old school way with a pen and paper and just kind of looking through stuff and trying to keep it all in my head. Ultimately, I agree with you. It's not a great betting race. I think we see it kind of pretty similarly. Defining Purpose is a horse that is a filly, I should say, that's just progressively gotten better every single time out from a buyer speed figure standpoint. From young horses, that's what you like to see, that sort of progression. I am a little bit worried about Olivia Twist. Now, we should mention Olivia Twist is half to Skippy Longstocking, who is going to be running in the Pegasus World Cup. That's a very cool kind of connection. Could be a very big day for the Dam Twinkling if she can produce two big time winners on this day. But the reason I'm a little out on Olivia Twist is I think that Taxed, the 6 horse, is going to put some speed pressure on her from the get-go. I think that could be problematic. She's also stretching out an extra half furlong, which admittedly is not the end of the world, but if you're getting that early pace pressure, it could be. And then the other thing is, just you mentioned stepping up in class. Interestingly enough, last time out, Olivia Twist beat a horse, Demi. That horse came back and ran 4th at OAKLAWN Park in an $80,000 allowance race and lost by about 4.5 lengths to a horse Towhead, who I like, is a nice horse. But, so I do wonder about this kind of graduation from Remington Park to OAKLAWN Park, and Defining Purpose having run against a very strong class of horses. I just think makes a lot of sense. I do think from a value standpoint, I'm intrigued by Take Charge Brianna. She's run against very, very good company in the past. She's a horse that, was vanned off 2 starts back, actually. But typical Dwayne Lucas factor got her right back out there on the track and running again. And she ran pretty well last time out, finished 3rd, and was making up a lot of ground late. So I think if you are going to see a little bit of pace up front with the 5 and the 6, that it's reasonable to expect Take Charge Brianna to maybe be able to make up some ground coming home late. And if you really like Defining Purpose, as we both do up top, maybe Take Charge Brianna at 6-1 on the morning line can add a little bit of value in an exacta or a vertical exotic in that way. But that's kind of how the way I saw the race shaping up.
I totally agree with you. You could play a 3-5 with 4 exacta. And that way you just key in the 4 and 2nd, or you could just play it ice cold 3-4.
Yep.
Because I do think Take Charge Brianna has a legitimate shot of taking 2nd. And then you're beating Wet Paint, and Wet Paint is the other horse I wanted to talk about. I think the horse is interesting.
She is. Yeah.
Mainly because of the potential slop that day. The horse just won in the slop, and the rail draw. If it didn't get the rail draw, it may not be as high in Wet Paint, but Wet Paint might get a really, really good trip. I don't like the path Wet Paint has taken, a very bizarre path going through Indiana and then up the Turfway.
Yeah.
So it's not a typical Brad Cox, Kentucky Oaks horse path.
Right.
So I'm a little down on it. I think 9-2 with Pratt up is not very, not the greatest price.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to beat Wet Paint. And I think Take Charge Brianna, the heavily raced closer, got a shot to hit that exacta.
Yep. No, I agree with you about Wet Paint. Very intriguing horse. If it is sloppy sealed, then, by the time that race goes off, then maybe we were just looking at the forecast before we started recording. And, it looks like maybe early in the card, it probably wouldn't lead to a sealed track sort of a situation. If the rain kind of holds off and maybe is a little bit later, maybe it's just a good track sort of a thing, but certainly something to keep an eye on as we approach post time there for the Martha Washington Stakes. But yeah, this one feels pretty straightforward from a betting standpoint and from kind of a handicapping standpoint. So let's move to the second of the 3 graded stakes races. And this is the 8th race on the card, the King Cotton Stakes for 4-year-olds and up, which is going 6 furlongs. And this is one which has an 8-horse field, 2 very strong favorites in Gunite and Flash and Mischief. And then you got I don't want to say also Rans, because there's some other nice horses in here. But it does seem like these top 2 have put themselves a little bit above the rest of the class in this particular field. Interestingly enough, I'll kind of start with some of my thoughts and kind of kick things over to you. But this is a race where I spent a lot of time trying to get past the top two, because that first race, I was like, oh man, it's really chalky. And we'll talk about the Southwest Stakes. That could be pretty chalky too. And I was like, oh man, I just don't want to go with chalk up top the whole way. So I really tried to go back and forth. The angle that I was worried about with Gunite is, of course, coming off that Breeders' Cup. Is there a Breeders' Cup hangover? That's something you see sometimes with horses. But ultimately, I just feel like, cutting back actually to 6 furlongs, Gunite, famously runs pretty well at 7 furlongs, but cutting back to 6 might actually be the best thing for this horse, coming off the layoff. The other thing about Gunite is he's come off the layoff before and run really well, as he did back in June of last year at Churchill Downs in a big time optional claiming race where he just lost to Conager. But, he's demonstrated the ability to come off the bench and run his race. And he just has very consistent speed figures, whereas Flash and Mischief is kind of all over the place. That every once in a while, he'll pop a really big triple-digit speed figure and then go back down to running in the 80s or, low 90s, and then pop up with another big speed figure. Last time out, ran a big speed figure on a sloppy sealed track. Again, taking weather into consideration, just wasn't sure what to do. But ultimately, I went with Gunite up top in this one. I am intrigued by the number 2 horse, Miles Ahead, and I'm always a sucker for a closer in a sprint race for some reason. And so Tejano Twist is always a horse that intrigues me, but there's not really a need to lead horse in this race. So I don't know what sort of pace is necessarily going to come out of it. So that's one of the reasons why maybe I'm not leaning towards Tejano Twist a little bit bigger. But Jeff, I'll kind of flip over to the chart so you can talk about kind of how you see this race.
I see it pretty much the same way you see it. You see the 1 score again in the DS column, and you see the value scores. No one's higher than a 6.
Yeah.
And the only horse that gets a letter grade and value, which is kind of a key thing for me, is which letter grade horse gets the most value is Miles Ahead. I think you could try to beat one of those, the 7 or the 3.
Yeah.
And then maybe you could put that 2 in second, or maybe the 1. It's pretty straightforward race. Again, the K plus on Gunite. I think Gunite gets a perfect trip here, stalking Flash of Mischief. And it's really hard for me to imagine Gunite not winning.
Yeah.
And I think Flash of Mischief, it's possible Flash of Mischief could tank after getting past. And then you've got the great closer, Tejano Twist, the only closer I would even consider. You could toss Ultimate.
Yeah.
And Miles Ahead, going to be tactical. That's a horse you could use in second. And then the wild card horse, I really don't know what to do with, is Radical Right.
Interesting. Yeah.
And because, previously trained by Dale Capuano. Sorry if I mispronounced that. On 26th
Capuano. Yeah.
Capuano. November 26th. And now is with Peter Miller and ships in with some pretty nice workouts, and Pratt gets on board. And the horse does get a few pounds of relief compared to the Flash of Mist. Just got to carry 124. So, I mean, Radical Right scares me. Okay, but only underneath. I still don't think anyone's going to beat Gunite. But you could play 7 over 126.
Yeah.
And that's it's hard to that 12 to 1 ain't going to come in, and that Pratt and Miller are going to get bet down.
Right.
12 to 1 is wrong. But more like 8 to 1 horse, I think.
Yeah. But still, if you can score that underneath, that's a nice little, and Flash of Mischief's presence is going to make sure that Gunite doesn't get bet down to something just unreasonable. Not going off at 2 to 5 or something like that. And which is a good thing, especially if you, to your point, if you just know, listen, I'm going to be able to beat Flash of Mischief, I'm going to go with Gunite and then fill in who's going to be underneath. That should allow you to find a little bit of value in an exacta. It's interesting. Radical Right it's an interesting horse. Definitely gave a couple of looks at that horse. I live not far from Laurel and Delaware Park and kind of this area of the country. I always stomp for those horses. I just don't know how good that Laurel form is in some of these instances. I will say, obviously, very good at 7 furlongs, or I should say 6 furlongs, the distance of this race, 4 for 4 in the money in his career with 2 wins and a second. So, 75% of the time in the exactas. So, again, you get a top-notch jockey on board. You get a trainer who typically you see horses perk up when they come to his barn. And so there's a lot to like there, certainly with Radical Right at that price. And even if that price gets bet down, which I think you and I are in agreement about, it still is going to provide you a little bit of value in this race. So, this is a maybe not a great betting race, but I think it's a fun race from a standpoint of seeing Gunite come back. I mean, I think he's a horse that a lot of people were really excited about towards the end of last year and just kind of got caught in this weird in-between zone with the Breeders' Cup, where he's not quite a 6 furlong sprinter. That's not his best distance. And he's not really a miler, which is where he ended up. And so, going that 7 furlongs is kind of his sweet spot. But like I said, coming back from the layoff, I actually like him at 6 furlongs, maybe a little bit more. And totally agree with you about the trip in terms of he'll just sit right off that speed and sets up perfectly. And the speed's not going to be ridiculous. So it's not like he's going to get sucked up into something too fast.
Yeah, just one final thing I want to mention here. So there's 3 columns. There's the pace column, which is my version of a Kieran rating. And you see there's no Fs. The F is a front runner. You only have Ts, which are tactical horses. So, I don't think the pace is going to be fast at all. And Gunite, the interesting thing on the cutback, I like to look at the spread between early and late speed. And you see Gunite has a very significant spread. 111 to 89. And usually when a horse cuts back with that kind of spread, they're gonna do well. So Gunite makes complete sense to me. And then maybe we can get a closer in underneath. But I think that's fortunately the way I got to see it. There's other races on the card we can go for our 10-1 shots. I don't think this is the spot.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, let's head to the last race that we'll cover for the day, and actually the second to last race on the card, race 10, which is the Southwest Stakes, which is of course a Kentucky Derby prep race, and this is for 3-year-olds. I'm going 1 mile and a 16th. Personally, I think this 9-horse field actually came up maybe a little stiffer than the Lecomte field from last week. Or at least there's more intriguing horses, I think, in this field. Last week, I just felt like Instant Coffee, just kind of we knew what we had. 2 fills I thought was a nice horse. I wasn't really overwhelmed by anybody else. And of course, that ended up only being a 6-horse field with a lot of other scratches. This one's a lot of fun, obviously highlighted by the Bob Baffert horse, Arabian Night, who broke his maiden so impressively on the Breeders' Cup undercard. And you have 3 Brad Cox runners in this race with Hit Show, Jace's Road, Corona Bolt. It's interesting for people, following the PPs at home. Florent Giroux, who is always Brad Cox's #1 jockey, is actually at Gulfstream on Saturday. So as a result, Cox has kind of his backup riders, if you will, running in this particular race with Pratt, with Manny Franco, with a few other, with Joe Talamo. So it's interesting to see kind of trying to read the tea leaves of which Brad Cox horse maybe he thinks is his best shot based upon who he's putting on those horses in this race. But this is one where I feel like, if you, depending on how strong of an opinion you have about Arabian Night, maybe it just starts and ends there. But I do feel like there's value in this race. And so, Jeff, I'll kind of turn things over to you and maybe talk through a little bit of how you see this one.
Yeah. So a few things. I want to talk a little bit about the trainer jockey. We haven't talked about that yet. Okay?
Yeah.
So you see the trainer score on Corona Bolt 8, Jace's Road 8, and Hit Show 8. Those are all Brad Cox. Now, the trainer score does not have to be the same. In fact, I'm sure they're not the same, but they all round to 8. Because when I give a trainer score, I'm going based on the angles for that horse. Okay. But the jockey score, Corona Bolt has got Pratt, and that's an 8. Jace's Road gets Talamo, that's a 5. And Hit Show gets Franco, that's a 7. And 3 points, 8 to 5, is pretty significant. Okay. Yeah. Joe Talamo is a 12% jockey. And when he rides for Cox, he's still a 12% jockey. That's poor. Okay. If my boldest toss is going to be Jace's Road. I
Mhm.
really am not a big fan. Now the slop maybe is actually the slop's bad. The one time the horse ran, the slop ran very poorly.
Yeah.
So I don't think the horse moves up there either. I really don't like the jock move, Giroux to Talamo at all. And I think Franco is a better jock on Hit Show, and you're getting 10-1 on Hit Show. But okay, so that's the first thing. I wanted to point out those trainer and jockey scores. Now, this is where I think there's a couple F runners in here, Arabian Night and Western Gent. Now, interesting tweets I saw, people talking about Arabian Night paddles. And I watched the head on of that horse coming home in his maiden victory.
Mm-hmm.
The horse does paddle quite a bit on his left front lead.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it makes a difference in this race, but the horse looked brilliant. Now look at that energy score, 103. Now granted, that was going 7 furlongs. However, let me just say, you break your maiden and go 7 furlongs, you're going to have me impressed. Okay.
Yep.
That's a tough distance to break your maiden, but 103 energy is by far the best energy. And what, $2.3 million horse, something like that.
That's exactly right.
I have a tough time getting around this horse. Now, the only horse that I think can beat it is the 2, Corona Bolt.
Mm-hmm.
Also stretching out, win 2 straight sprints, and now stretching out. But you can't. And by the way, the morning line's wrong here. Corona Bolt 6-1, Jace's Road 4-1.
Yeah.
No way that's accurate.
Yeah.
Hold on one second.
Yep.
Alexa, off. No way that's accurate. Those are wrong. Corona Bolt's going to get bet down to clear second choice.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, not going to use Corona Bolt or Jace's Road, and I'm going to try to get my value horse, which is Red Route 1.
Mm-hmm.
Asmussen. This horse has got an incredible closing kick. And I think this horse is going to enjoy the pace he gets to run at, and could hit the exacta, and maybe I can hit a 6-7 ice cold exacta. And that's kind of the main way I'm looking at it. You could also use the 8 underneath, and not sure I'd look at anything else. But that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Red Route 1, to me, I love that horse.
Mm-hmm.
You could play a small win bet on that horse.
Mm-hmm.
If the whole race collapsed, but I really like that horse underneath in the exactas or trifectas.
Yeah, I think again we kind of see this one pretty similarly, and I think that speaks to just the general fields in this race. But it's interesting. I really like Corona Bolt a lot as a horse.
Okay.
I'm a fan of Corona Bolt. I like that horse a lot. I don't love the way this race sets up for the Corona Bolt, in that we're stretching out for the first time, and we have Arabian Night going out fast. Mm-hmm. And Corona Bolt typically goes out fast. Now, Corona Bolt can rate a little bit, but I think there's still that horse ideally would want to go. Now, Pratt, I think, is as good as anyone. And I made this in my notes when I was writing, I always take notes in my DRF. And Pratt's as good as anyone at calming horses down. It feels like he's always so good. I just feel like he's always good. He's a good influence. He's a very calming influence, I feel like, on horses. So if he can get Corona Bolt to kind of calm down maybe a little bit and just kind of feel into the race, that would be great. But I don't love the way this sets up. Corona Bolt's pedigree underneath is pretty sprinter heavy. I mean, the dam does have a couple of turf route winners that's existed, but it is a lot of sprint pedigree underneath. And so I do worry a little bit about stretching out, but man, I like that horse a lot. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, from a betting standpoint, I'm in complete agreement with you. Red Route 1 at 10-1. Are you kidding me? I'll take that all day long. I recurring joke, when all else fails, bet Gun Runner. And so if you're going to give me a Gun Runner with Asmussen at 10-1, I'll take it every single day. I just think this horse has, you're right, a ton of late speed, and has had some difficulty in previous races in terms of just like getting tucked in sometimes, or just being boxed out. And so I just think this horse gets a better trip this time, a little bit of a smaller field than some of the bigger ones he's run against before, run against very, very good company. Really like this horse a lot. The other horse that I will mention just briefly is on the rail, and you mentioned the rail at OAKLAWN.
Mm-hmm.
Sun Thunder is an interesting horse and kind of maybe a lesser version of Red Route 1 to some extent. Another horse that likes to come from well off the pace, should have plenty of speed to run into. I don't always trust Ken McPeek in big days, but still Sun Thunder at 10-1, I thought was, that's kind of one, maybe wait and see what the post time odds are. And maybe I include the one underneath in some sort of an exacta trifecta, but I do really like Arabian Night quite a bit. I think from a win standpoint, hard to get around this horse, and it could not have been more impressive. And I am a sucker for betting horses that I've seen run in person. And I saw Arabian Night that day on the undercard, and I was like, man, that's a horse right there. And the final thing I'll say is, people sometimes I think will nitpick Bob Baffert horses when they run outside of California. Baffert has a lot of success at OAKLAWN, actually won this race last year with Newgate. So Baffert shipping to OAKLAWN and winning there, I don't see that being an issue. And I think sometimes people can get a little skeptical about that, but I don't see any issues with that at all. So ultimately, I kind of saw it the same way with Arabian Night up top. I'll try to get my value underneath with Red Route 1. And in my heart, I'll be rooting for Corona Bolt because, and Jeff, I don't know if you know this story, my former student at the University of Texas, El Paso actually named Bolt Doro because she helped train Bolt Doro. And so I've always rooted for Bolt Doro. And so therefore I root for all the baby Bolts now. And hence why I really like Corona Bolt. So
that's nice.
Yeah. So a little bit of a, 6 degrees of separation between me and the horse. So
one other thing I just want to chime in on.
Yeah.
So, I've said before, rail is gold. Okay.
Yeah.
Red Route 1. I'm sorry. Corona Bolt's going to get the rail. And you got 3 Cox horses in there. I think they're going to go. I think they're going to go with Pratt from the rail. And I think Arabian Night takes back and stalks Corona Bolt. And then Western Gent, who has no shot, I don't think, to even hit the super. Right. And probably is not even fast enough to keep up with those two. Probably just gets completely outrun. But if Western Jet gets an incredible break and somehow can hang up there for a little while, you might get a decent pace. And, maybe Red Route 1 can take the whole thing down.
Yeah.
I like the draw. I like that 7-hole for Red Route 1. It's a good draw to come closing in, especially if it tracks got some nasty kickback.
Yeah.
And definitely I'll take a heads up bet. Hit Show is going to beat Jace's Road. I like Hit Show better. And Manuel Franco wins 24% with Cox, and Pratt wins like 38% with Cox. So I think the jockeys tell the story on the Cox horses. He's got 3 in there. He's going to go after Baffert. He's going to go after. And maybe it sets up for Asmussen.
It might. It might very well. They might cannibal each other a little bit in terms of just pushing that pace a little too much. And you're right. Asmussen definitely, I think, has the best closer in this field. So we'll see. This is an intriguing race. I think you can definitely get out of the. If you want to try to beat Arabian Night, I think this is a race you could potentially do it because of as you just said, some of the dynamics that could set up in this one.
I tell you right now, I'm betting Red Route 1 to win, and then I'll bet a saver exacta Arabian Night over Red Route 1. So that's how I'm going to play that race.
Yep. Now, well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And again, make sure to check out Jeff. You can get the link to his website on the video below, and also check him out on Twitter. Info chart. Is it info charting HO1? Is that right? All right. Yeah. Info charting HO1, and great follow, great product. Check it out on the website or on HRN. But Jeff, thank you again for joining me. And I hope you have a non-rainy. I hope you have a lovely day at OAKLAWN Park on Saturday.
Thank you.
All right.
And let's hit that Pegasus as well. And good luck this weekend to you.
All right. Really appreciate it. And make sure to like and subscribe the video and subscribe to Trust the Profits. And until next time, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.